Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Media Pit podcast. So today we're talking about the Resident Evil 3 remake that was released in April of 2020. It was created by Capcom, of course, and yeah, as the title suggests, it's a remake of the original Resident Evil 3, which was released in 1999. I actually just recently got around to playing this game, even though it's been out for like almost 2 years now. And I played this game together with two friends, so we all got our shot at playing certain sections of the game. Overall, I probably was playing for most of it, I think. So yeah, let's jump straight into it, because I got a lot to say. And it's not all positive. In fact, most of it's actually negative. But my major issues with the game might not be what you'd expect. Keep in mind that I've only played this game once, and that one time I only played on the normal difficulty. So I won't be able to speak on any of the other extra content or the other difficulty levels. So yeah, let's start. So we've got our protagonist, Jill Valentine. She's an ex-cop in Raccoon City. That name is so freaking stupid. And she's attacked in her apartment by this weird Hulk monstrosity called Nemesis. And then we have to run away from this creature that's trying to kill us, while the T-virus is breaking out all over the city, and there are zombies everywhere. The main goal is basically to survive and leave the city, while fighting Nemesis and some other monsters and enemies along the way. So the game starts, and the first thing we are shown is an advertisement video of sorts for Umbrella Corp, and a little teaser for Nemesis as well. It's there. I don't really have a strong opinion on this first clip. I guess it's a decent introduction to the overall premise of the story, but yeah, I guess they also could have cut it. Anyway, moving on. The game interestingly starts with a short, nightmare sequence in first person. It's pretty dark and ominous. You don't really know what's going on. And then you go into the bathroom, and Jill looks in the mirror and sees herself slowly becoming a zombie. And then she freaks out and wakes up. I think this is a pretty well done opening, honestly. It certainly gets you in the mood for a very scary and tense experience. So Jill wakes up, for real this time, in her apartment, and we walk around a bit. We can look at some photos and pictures, letters that give us some background info on what's going on with Raccoon City, and Umbrella and Jill, which is pretty cool, you know. It's kind of a bit of environmental storytelling, although it's not really that because it's just some text that you can read. But anyway. And then she gets called by her friend, and just as he tells her that something is coming for her, Nemesis just pops in out of nowhere and starts chasing her around. And this first chase sequence, although very short, is actually pretty neat. It's very tense, and there's an absurd amount of destruction. It's pretty enjoyable stuff. However, at this point, I already started to notice some logical problems that I couldn't ignore. First, Nemesis grabs her, kicks her against a wall, and she just takes it. I mean, Nemesis is supposed to be this extremely powerful weapon, and he's specifically designed to kill former STARS members. But he barely does any significant damage to Jill. She tanks so many hits, it's insane. Her plot armor is very prominent throughout the entire game, and it will only get worse from here. Besides the horrendous plot armor though, Nemesis is also a fucking idiot. Remember, he's a killing machine. He's supposed to be very capable. And what does he do in this first chase sequence? He smashes through the wall, kicks her, lifts her up, smashes her on the ground, and tries to stomp her with his foot. Like, dude, you pretty much had her. You could have just snapped her neck right here. Use your weird tentacles, or hell, he could probably just crush her skull. He legitimately is one of the worst killing machines I've ever seen. He doesn't even try to kill her. This will also get worse as we go along, although this sequence is pretty bad already. So at the end, Jill manages to escape by running out of the burning building, and some huge stones have fallen between the exit and Nemesis, so of course he can't get through. He also can't go around and take another route or anything. And after Jill exits the building, Nemesis is just silent. It really seems like he just disappeared from the scene. And with that, the first Nemesis part is over, and he's basically disabled for whenever the game needs him next. Even though, realistically, he would still go after Jill and chase her around the entire time. And this is what I expected the game to be at first. I thought that you'd have to run from Nemesis almost the entire game, and that this was the reason why the game was rather short, because, it's just a whole bunch of Nemesis action all the time. But no, the game is very clearly structured in Nemesis and non-Nemesis parts. And then we meet the guy that called us outside, and we see all the zombies and the destruction in the city. And ignoring the fact that they seem very chill, considering 1, Nemesis was just behind Jill a minute ago, and 2, there are zombies practically everywhere. I actually like the presentation of this small sequence. The music and the set pieces with all the burning buildings and stuff, it's pretty good. And then we get another cutscene, because the zombies are getting closer and are running towards them. So the guy gets bitten and he stays behind. Jill gets away, picks up a gun from a dead officer, and now the real shit can start. Shooting zombies, solving puzzles, all that good Resident Evil stuff. So we walk around a bit, we kill some zombies along the way, to get in the groove of things. We meet this one crazy paranoid guy who locks himself up into this container, thinking he will somehow survive in there. I mean, you do you, buddy. And we walk around a bit more, kill some more zombies, and then Jill enters a lift that takes her up to the top of a building, where a rescue helicopter is going to pick her up, but then it gets shot by something and crashes down. And then we see Nemesis in the distance, slowly, very slowly walking towards Jill. 'Cause he has to be super intimidating. He cannot run at her, because, why would he do that? That's not menacing enough. Guys, come on. So Jill decides to get into a car that apparently was just conveniently right beside her. And of course she can turn it on and everything. And then, as Nemesis is still slowly walking towards her, she hits the gas, slams into Nemesis, and drives them both off the top of the building. So, yeah, she's 100% dead. There's no way she would be able to survive something like this. But of course she does. So, they both slam onto the street. Jill also didn't even break any bones, or heaven forbid, got knocked out for some time. She's hurting, sure, but she can still move, and there are no lasting consequences for her because of this. Which is stupid, but okay. So she starts crawling out of the car, and Nemesis starts approaching the car, and she gets maybe 2 meters, at maximum 3 meters away from the car, before it explodes. And it throws her to the ground. The explosion does something. No damage, of course, which it should be doing, but hey, it's still something. And then we see Nemesis, and his entire body is lighting up in flames because of the explosion. But he doesn't care, because he has only one goal, and that is to eliminate Jill Valentine. And nothing is going to stop him. But then, he doesn't do anything. Jill is right there. She's weak. She certainly can't run away. If Nemesis truly wanted to kill her, he could have done it right here, no problem. And just like before, he slowly, very slowly walks towards her, and then stands there to look evil and menacing. He's not doing anything. And then we meet the best character in the game, my boy Carlos. And he saves Jill by shooting Nemesis with a rocket launcher. And he's knocked out for now. He will obviously come back. Maybe Carlos could have fired all the rockets he had, just to be a little more safe that he's dead. But, not a huge issue. So we go into the subway and meet the Russian captain of Carlos's team. They basically have a bunch of civilians they want to evacuate in a train, and Jill agrees to help them, because she's a great person. Which means for us, our current goal is to restore the power and get the train moving. So we get some equipment and then go onto the streets. We fight some zombies, go into some buildings, open some locks, pick up some items. One thing to note about the zombies though, they don't have a lot of different models, so that sometimes you'll end up killing a guy, walk 5 steps, and then there's the same guy again, which generally is not the best way to immerse the player into your game. And this happens more frequently than it should. I wouldn't say they've done a terrible job at spreading all their enemy models across the map, but this could have easily been avoided by just adding maybe 3 or 7 more zombie models and pay a bit more attention to not place the exact same model within like a 10-meter radius. So that's one minor issue. And then there are these 3 zombies that are trying to get over these fences. They obviously can't do it, they just keep clinging to them without moving them an inch. But of course, when the game needs to proceed, they all of a sudden become much stronger, throw them to the ground, and start attacking Jill. Not sure why they were so completely incompetent beforehand, but I'm sure there's a very good reason for it, right? And this is part of a larger personal issue I have with these types of survival horror games. It's that their worlds just feels like a video game. You've got these wooden boxes with the yellow tape, or the cases with a special weapon inside, and these logs you can open spread over the map. And all that is fine, because you need to integrate all the game elements into the worlds in some way or another. But personally, I find it a little hard to feel very immersed in a game, especially when it's supposed to be scary, when there are all these very gimmicky and gamified parts. And it kind of throws me off a little. But it's not a huge problem. This is just a very personal preference on my part. So then, we meet Mikolai. And the first thing we see him do is shooting that poor team member of his, who might have been infected. And he tells Jill that she should look out for herself first, and that self-preservation is the most important thing and all that. Gee, I wonder if that might be an important element to his character going forward. But yeah, then he just leaves. I'm not sure what he was even doing there. He basically shows up out of nowhere, and then he just leaves. What was he doing here exactly? Anyhow, moving on. We arrive at the place where we can restore the power, but there's a gigantic nest of these strange spider thingies. This part of the game is very weird. First, we have this horrible sequence where this one spider monster comes down and deep throats Jill. And while doing that, it plants some parasites into her or something. It's pretty disturbing stuff. And then you've got a very weird level where you need to run through a little labyrinth, fight these spider things that spawn infinitely until you activate the power. Honestly, this part feels a bit out of place compared to the rest of the game. And these spider monsters feel a bit thrown in. We don't get an explanation for why these things are here, or what this giant nest is doing there, and where it came from. Not that it's super necessary, but these things don't seem to have any connection to the rest of the zombies, or the other experiments of Umbrella. Yeah, so then Jill destroys the nest, and power is restored, all good. But then on the way back, Nemesis slams through a wall and starts going after her. But only very shortly, because as soon as Jill goes into a building, he stops chasing her. But as soon as she leaves the building, he starts chasing her again. This is another big issue I have with Nemesis. He always just pops out of nowhere super quickly. And as fast as he appears, he also just disappears into thin air when the Nemesis part is over. He seems to just casually pop in and out of existence. His sections feel so incredibly scripted and planned out that I never felt intimidated or scared. Although I will say that he does move very fast. And his attacks in this normal state can be pretty challenging. He charges at you and grabs you and pulls you towards him. But then again, I wish he would really try to kill Jill. Instead, he often just does some attacks, and there are many opportunities for him to just kill Jill right here. But he doesn't, and instead just stands around. It's ridiculous. He'll hit Jill, knock her to the ground, and then he stands there and doesn't finish the job. He just waits for her to get up before he starts chasing her again. One interesting thing that happens around that time is that Nemesis starts transforming some zombies into these alien tentacle versions of themselves. They basically have some watered down abilities of Nemesis, but without the speed, and they are much more dangerous than normal zombies, which is actually something I like, because you have to be very careful and fight them at a large distance. I also like their design quite a bit. Their heads look very strange and alien, and they've got a big red glowing eye in the middle. Yeah, they look pretty awesome. So then Jill gets back with Carlos, and they also meet that guy Nikolai from earlier. And of course he's a jerk, like before. But then Nemesis approaches them. And Jill decides to leave herself behind so she can distract Nemesis. Which, good on her. You know, pretty heroic, pretty badass. And then there's this super weird, short chase sequence where at the end, Jill goes into a shaft which leads to the sewers. That's the entire chase. It's like 1 minute or so. And of course, Nemesis is out again. This just keeps and keeps on happening. So then the game continues in the sewers. And this portion isn't all that special. You have to use like a portable battery to open certain doors. And you also fight these horrifying looking crocodile monstrosities, which look very cool in my opinion. And they are also super tanky, except for one weak spot being their enormous tongue, which I guess is also their mouth in some way. It's almost like a sort of beak with huge monster teeth. Looks pretty freaky. And yeah, we fight these guys for a while and then make our way back up. And what comes next is just so incredibly stupid. So as soon as Jill reaches the top of the ladder, Nemesis again appears out of nowhere, grabs her by the head, and of course, throws her away from him. Like, dude, why are you so fucking incompetent? And while Jill is looking at him, he slowly aims her flamethrower at her, wherever he got that from, and then he doesn't do anything. He's just waiting for her to get up and run away. And then Jill runs away for 10 seconds, gets under a garage door, closes it behind her, and yup, guess what? That's it. She's safe now. What the fuck? Why would this stop Nemesis? He's a fucking super strong Hulk killing machine. This quick 30-second Nemesis sequence sums up almost every issue I have with Nemesis. He's more focused on being intimidating than actually killing his target, and he is stopped by stuff that absolutely should not stop him. And when the player can just tell in certain sections that they are fine and safe, that's a pretty bad sign in my book. So then we work our way up this building and Nemesis again pops up and starts burning everything. And there's another very short sequence where Nemesis is super near Jill and just points his flamethrower at her, waiting for her to start running. And then we get to the top. And now we get to our first boss fight. Let's go. So Nemesis jumps on top of the roof and we start fighting him now. So is this first boss fight any good? No. He only does 3 attacks in this entire fight. The normal fire blast with his flamethrower, that one charging attack, and the one attack where he shoots up in the air and fire starts coming down around him. That's it. Plus, besides that one charging attack, Nemesis moves very slow in this fight. It seems like he isn't actually trying all that hard to kill her. And there's not even an actual second phase to this fight. After you explode his fuel tank by shooting it enough, Nemesis just drops to the ground and then stands back up in flames. And the rest of the fight remains the exact same. No new attacks or mechanics or anything. I find the charging attack especially stupid because sometimes he starts running towards you, but then he very awkwardly just stops. This is also by far the least challenging boss fight, except for the very last one, which I don't even want to count as a boss fight. I'd give this boss fight a score of 3 out of 10 at most. It's pretty bad. So then we beat Nemesis, for now of course, and then just right before the whole building starts to explode, Jill runs, jumps off the building and slides down the side of the building. And if you're watching this episode on YouTube, which I highly recommend, you can see that the shit she manages to pull off here is pretty insane. She lands on a construction framework, it breaks loose, and she holds onto it, like Spider-Man, until it breaks, and she falls like 5 meters to the ground. And then the framework almost crashes on her, but she rolls to the side and is safe. This shouldn't have happened if she's just a normal human. When she fell to the ground, she should have broken some bones, or at least be so exhausted that she couldn't have reacted to the framework falling on her. And after that, she just gets up and starts walking again, like nothing happened. The only thing showing us that she's in any way impacted or hurt by all the shit she's experiencing is her holding her tummy, as if that's the only place where she would feel pain. It's so lazily done, I really don't like it. I can picture the game devs in my head thinking, well, Jill should express her pain in some way. We can't just have her not acknowledge it at all. That would be weird. Oh yeah, Let's just make her hold her stomach and make a painful face for a couple of times. Done. Jill's plot armor is truly one of my biggest gripes with this entire game, because it's so apparent that the game wants you to think how cool and badass she is, but this just ends up making her way too resistant to stuff that would absolutely wreck a normal human. And now we get to the first location we also saw in a much better game than this one, the Resident Evil 2 remake. And here we come across that one guy from the previous game, whose daughter has been infected, and he's trying everything to keep her alive and sane. And I really like that part. It's short, it's insignificant, and I only like it because it ties back to the Resi 2 remake, but still, I do like it. I also like the ambient soundtrack that plays in this specific section. It reminds me a lot of another soundtrack I absolutely adore, which is the track Making Your Way Home from The Evil Within 2. Also a much better game than this one, by the way. And then we go on a bit until, shocker, Nemesis pops up again with a fucking rocket launcher. I feel like every time Nemesis is knocked out, some Umbrella guys just find him, pick him up, give him new upgrades, and then send him off again. Seriously, where does he get all these weapons from? And Nemesis starts spamming you with these rockets, and they don't do any damage. It's insane. This is another horrendous case of plot armor, because Jill only takes any damage if the rockets hit her directly. And even if she gets hit by a rocket, she doesn't die immediately, which is fucking ridiculous. If you remember, Carlos used the rocket launcher to knock out Nemesis with only one shot. And then this special whatever kind of rocket launcher can't kill Jill even if the rockets hit her directly. It's so dumb. And the explosions the rockets make when they hit like 2 inches away from her don't even do any damage whatsoever. Like, this is the worst rocket launcher I've ever seen. Again, if you're watching the YouTube version, just look at this. How is that a thing? Jill is like immune to environmental damage. And then there's a cutscene in which the exact opposite happens. Nemesis shoots a rocket, hits the ground right next to her, and she gets yanked like 6 meters away. And then Nemesis keeps chasing us and shooting his stupid, inconsistent rockets until we get back to the train station. And right before that, Nemesis almost gets to us, but my boy Carlos jumps in again and helps Jill out. Such a chat. And we get some dialogue between them. Carlos tells her how she was the one who saved him first, and that she's a lot braver than him, even though he technically saved her the first time from Nemesis. Carlos, man. Such a humble guy. And down in the station, the captain tells Carlos and his buddy Tyrell that they need to go back on the streets of the city and find Nathaniel Bard, because he's created a vaccine for the T-virus, which of course is extremely important. And Jill is a little concerned that they might not make it, and Carlos says to Jill, and I quote, "Don't worry, I'm not gonna die on you and leave you in a cold, cruel, Carlosless world," which is like the best line in the entire game. I fucking love it. And then we get a cutscene of Jill sitting in the train, and there's that guy Nikolai talking with the captain. But then Nemesis comes out of nowhere, again, and starts destroying the train. Nikolai escapes as soon as he can, and Nemesis grabs the captain. And the captain's last words before blowing himself up are, "Get off my train, shitbird," which is the second best line in the entire game. And his Russian accent makes this line even better. So the train derails, and we get a hard cut to black. And then we see, drumroll, the Raccoon City Police Department of Resi 2. Carlos and his buddy Tyrell approach the police department because they think that the scientist is in one of the offices. And then we get another pretty cool connection to the Resi 2 remake. We see how that one infected police officer that we met in the lobby got infected. And then we see him running inside. This is a pretty cool thing in my opinion. Again, on its own, it's almost nothing. It's only cool because we recognize him from the previous game. So then they get inside the department, which obviously looks identical to the one in Resi 2, just about 12 hours earlier, but the infected police officer is gone. And we never meet him while going through the department, which is kinda weird. Where the hell did he go so quickly? Maybe it's because he knows that they are soldiers that work for Umbrella, and he's worried that they might kill him because he's infected? Not sure. It just feels strange to see him enter the department and then just be non-existent afterwards. They even could have given him his own little mini-arc in this section. That would have been great, actually. That way, we would like him even more, which makes his fate at the end way more impactful. But what they did here feels a little bare bone to me. Actually, they could have done so much more with this guy. So I'm changing my mind. I don't like that they put him here. And we spent the next 40 hours or so doing very similar stuff to what you do in the Resi 2 remake, which is expected. And the only thing worth mentioning is that one written note you find stick to a locker. If you remember, in the previous game, in the upper floors, there's a locker with a zombie coming out of it. And this note gives this guy some character. He wrote this note to a friend, telling him that his fate is doomed, and that he will lock himself in that locker, and that his buddy should not ever open it. It's a small detail, but I think it's pretty cool. Although this could have just been a workaround on the developer's part, because they needed to have a reason for Carlos not to open the locker, so that Leon can open it in the next game, or in the previous game rather. And now that I think about it, they kinda laid their own obstacles by choosing to reuse the department as a location. Because you need to keep everything the exact same way, so that it doesn't contradict what happens in the Resi 2 remake. I'm very interested in why they decided to reuse that location at all. Maybe like financial reasons or something? Who knows? And another neat thing in this section is that we actually fight a licker, which are my personal favorite enemies in all of Resident Evil. So that's pretty cool. And a side note, I really like Carlos's weapons and his mechanics. He's much more fun to play than Jill in my opinion. So they make their way to the upper police office, and without hesitation, in a matter of seconds, Carlos walks up to the next computer and opens up a Skype call with Mr. Science, Nathaniel Bard. I like that name. I think I'm going to call him Mr. Science from now on. And yeah, they start talking. This seems highly contrived. How the hell would Carlos know to operate the computer and successfully establish a connection to Mr. Science that quickly? Plus, very convenient that that specific computer was 1, turned on for some reason, and 2, happened to have a face cam attached to it, so they both can see each other while talking. And I made sure to check, no other of the computers have a face cam at all. This whole sequence feels super fabricated and artificial, because all of these very conventional things just happen to be at the exact place the story needs them to. And then we get another cutscene where Jill apparently calls Carlos, telling him about the derailed train, and then shortly after, the connection is lost, and Carlos immediately, without any hesitation, decides that he needs to find Jill and save her. Which, given everything they've been through up until this point, I think I can get behind that. And there might also be some romantic interest going on between the two. Maybe? So yeah, now we switch back to Jill where we left off. Jill gets out of the subway, onto the streets, and then she gets to a bridge. And we see Nemesis very clumsily falling into the river, which I'm not sure why he was freaking out so much. All the times before that, he was just fine with being on flames. But now he's freaking out about it? So yeah, that's something. And Jill walks across the bridge while contacting Carlos. She talks to him for a bit, telling him about the train and stuff. And then Nemesis jumps out of the river onto the bridge. And now he's transformed into some weird kind of giant fish, wolf, ghoul thing. And then we get a very short chase sequence that maybe lasts like 15 seconds. Not even kidding. And the level of plot armor in this short part is so fucking excruciating. First, Jill slams some, I don't even know what the hell this is, like some part of a stone wall onto Nemesis, and they have so much impact that it stops him for a good 2 seconds. I don't know how heavy these things are, but I feel like Nemesis should have just slammed them to the side. And then Nemesis charges at Jill 2 separate times with his gigantic claws, and she some fucking how dodges both of them perfectly. He doesn't even scratch her. If you're watching the YouTube version, you can see just how strange and contrived this looks. And then Jill jumps from the bridge and lands in the boss area. Nemesis follows, and now it's boss time again. This second boss fight is much better than the first one in my opinion. I wouldn't call it good, but I think it's fine. This fish monster design of Nemesis is very cool. It looks pretty creepy, and it's very detailed as well. His attacks and movement animations also look really nice. And I don't know if it's just me, but I also like the sound design of his steps and his roars and his attacks. Like when he slams his claw into the ground, for example. Gameplay wise, it's alright. Just like with the first fight, his attack variety is way too small, and overall they are pretty easy to dodge. Even more than the first boss, because at least there was that one charging attack which was sometimes tough to dodge. And most of the fight is just made up of spamming the shit out of him with the grenade launcher. He also gets stunned by every successful hit, so there can be parts where he just doesn't move until you stop blasting him with grenades. And this kinda makes this fight feel much less dynamic. I think they should have amped up Nemesis' poise and reduce his health bar. Oh my god, yeah, the health bar is ginormous. The fight takes way too long at the end. It feels like a drag to get through. The only really cool thing about this fight is part of the second phase, where he starts jumping up the cars and run around until he climbs to the top of that large building and then jumps on you. And even that attack is super easy to avoid. But you can use the landmine grenades that explode on impact to catch him off guard while he's running on circles on top of the cars. Which I guess is something, some cool mechanic, I guess. I would give this boss fight a generous 5 out of 10. So Nemesis is defeated, and then Jill is about to go through the big gate, but then Nemesis makes one last attempt at getting to her, and he almost has her, but she shoots the chain of that gate with the spikes, which cuts off Nemesis' arm, and she's almost safe. However, Nemesis finally does something remotely clever and injures/infects her with some weird tentacle spike before he goes down. So Jill is now infected and falls unconscious. And right before she gets unconscious, Nikolai walks up to the gate and thanks Jill for killing Nemesis. And he says it in a very villainous manner, which I don't even really get what this guy is even trying to do, or why he even walked up to this gate. But maybe we'll find out later. Who knows? Then we get a time skip of roughly half a day, and Carlos actually managed to find Jill, which is kinda lucky, I think. But anyway, he found her and takes her to the hospital, hoping that maybe Mr. Science's vaccine can save her, because Mr. Science told Carlos that he's currently located in that hospital. So we arrive at the hospital, Carlos lays Jill on a sick bed, and I don't know if it's just me, but Jill's moaning sounds are a little too erotic for my liking. And you constantly hear her moans while you are in the same hospital room. But maybe the T-virus does that to you, I don't know. And now we again play as Carlos, trying to find the vaccine and stuff. Even though we just played as Jill for like 10 minutes. Yeah, it feels pretty awkward. We only made that character switch for the Nemesis fight, and then switched right back to Carlos afterwards. Which I'm not necessarily complaining about, because I really enjoy playing as him, but just saying, it feels a bit out of place. So we go through the hospital, fight some zombies with actually some new model designs. They're wearing doctor and nurse coats, which is something at least. Otherwise though, it would be super weird if their outfits didn't match the hospital environment at all, and they were just the same ones we encountered earlier. And yeah, we do all kinds of regular stuff for some time, and then we run into a new enemy type. And these guys look like a downsized and slightly more agile version of the Rancors of Star Wars. They actually look extremely similar, like suspiciously similar. And these guys are horrible. They are the worst enemies in the entire game. And I will get to the specifics when we talk about the gameplay overall, but for now, just know that they are a pain in the ass to deal with. But you can actually deal with them much better, because Carlos is a freaking superhuman apparently, who can punch everything away like a total Chad. Dude, what the heck? This is insane. And then we get to the doc, and he's dead, presumably by suicide. And Carlos watches a recording of Dr. Science in which he talks about how Umbrella are very evil and how they want to erase all the evidence of the T-virus, including the vaccine, yada yada, etc, etc. Like, guys, did you know that Umbrella is an evil company? And then we get one sample of the vaccine that we use on Jill, and she calms down, falls asleep, and slowly starts to recover. Carlos waits by her side for a very long time, because he cares about her a lot, and then his buddy Tyrell arrives and turns on the TV, and the TV announces that Raccoon City will be completely destroyed by rocket missiles in like a day or so. And now it's getting pretty rough, because a full horde of zombies is trying to break into the hospital. I'm not sure why they all desperately want to enter the hospital in particular. I don't think the game gives an actual reason for that, but anyway. Now we get a pretty cool sequence, where Carlos needs to stop all the zombies from entering the hospital, and I actually like this part. It's pretty fun, and it's very different from the rest of the game. The logistics of this are obviously non-existent, but it's still fun. And then Carlos activates a bomb that blows up at the end of the section, and it's just so stupid how all the zombies that were spread throughout the entire hospital lobby just a few seconds ago, all are just gone because of the explosion. Like that one bomb, Thanos snapped all of them out of existence. I mean, visually it looks so dumb. There's no way I'm accepting what just happened to all of these zombies as a result of that explosion. So now we get a cutscene where Carlos decides to leave Tyrell with Jill and go somewhere. I really have no clue where he's going. He might be checking up with the other teammates to get help from them or something. I really have no clue. Maybe I'm just stupid. Oh no, wait. He's trying to find the extra supply of the vaccine that is stored in this secret underground storage facility of Umbrella. Mr. Science Guy mentioned that in the video log. And then we get a second first-person nightmare sequence. Jill wakes up on the sick bed. She gets up, and Carlos enters the room, telling her that the city is safe. But then, he suddenly starts choking blood and transforms into a zombie. Jill pulls out a gun and he desperately tells her to shoot him, but she can't and he jumps right at the camera. And then Jill wakes up out of her recovery coma of sorts, looks around, gathers her stuff, and walks up to Tyrell. He tells her that Carlos went away to find the mass supply of the vaccine underground in order to save the remains of the city, and Jill, being the awesome badass chick that she is, decides to go and help Carlos. I mean, she just got vaccinated and was almost lost to the T-virus. She just woke up and is already ready to do more? After all the shit she already dealt with, keep in mind. Yeah, like I said, she's definitely not human. But Carlos also isn't, with his Giga Chad super punch. And then we walk through the hospital again, fight some more of these wannabe rankers, and then we find and enter a secret entrance that leads to a gigantic underground facility with some huge movable platforms and other crazy machines and stuff. And then we come across Nikolai. What? What the hell is he doing here? Well, no idea, but he's certainly evil or something. So what follows next is Jill needs to collect a total of 3 batteries to get the lift working so she can get to Nikolai. So we wander around a bit, move some platforms around, and collect all the 3 batteries. And during that, we actually meet a new enemy, which are these skinny, pale, and hairless creatures. These are my favorite enemies in the entire game. They look so creepy, and they have extremely fast regenerating cells, so you can only kill them with heavy weapons. They also look very different from all the other enemies, which are much more outlandish and exaggerated in design. The sounds they make are also super creepy. But in this section, there's a point where you run into some zombies and one of these crocodile dog creatures. And looking at where you encounter them, I cannot think of one logical reason why these enemies were in that location at all. It again seems highly artificial and unrealistic that these enemies just appear right here and right after you take the last battery. Especially the big ranker guys that attack you right in this area feel like they were just thrown in for the hell of it. Why would they even be in this storage facility? So then the elevator takes us up, Jill looks around, and then our boy Tyrell joins the party. He tells Jill that he made a deal with the government that they won't destroy the city if they can get them the vaccine in a few hours. So they walk through some corridors, but then Nemesis appears, right out of nowhere again, and he kills Tyrell. No. And he almost gets to Jill, but she manages to close a large automatic door between both of them. I find it pretty weird that Nemesis doesn't even slam at the door, or at least screams a couple of times after the door closed on him. He straight up just goes silent after the door is closed, which is kind of strange. Jill starts going through the facility, killing some more of these creepy pale guys and some normal zombies. And then we get to a machine that can create a vaccine. But we need 2, components in order to do so. So we get them, combine them, and then the machine makes the vaccine. And right after that, we get another cutscene in which we see Jill take the vaccine from the machine, and then that weird Nemesis tentacle grabs her by the neck and lifts her up. Jill immediately pulls out her knife and tries cutting the tentacle, but it doesn't seem to work. But then, for some stupid reason, Nemesis just throws her away. He could have easily choked her to death while he had her in his grip, but whatever. Then Jill crossed through a shaft, into another room, and there's Nemesis waiting for her and grabbing her by the head. Still not crushing or choking her, but just trying to slowly pull her towards him. And Jill fucking shoots at that gas tank, it explodes, And in the next shot, Nemesis has just completely disappeared. It looks so horrible. But then his tentacle still grabs her leg, and then we get a super great and highly thrilling and engaging QuickTime event in which we just have to press one button to crawl forward. I'm not kidding. Nemesis doesn't pull any harder or anything. He just holds onto us with his tentacle, Jill slowly crawls forward, and then the second tank explodes, and this makes Nemesis disappear again, of course. What is even happening? So Jill opens the door and steps into this huge dispenser facility, which Umbrella apparently uses to, eliminate their experiments and stuff. She walks down the stairs, and Nemesis breaks through a wall. He jumps on the staircase, and it breaks. He slips off and falls into the center of that huge dispenser field. Jill almost slips off as well, but she manages to hold herself on the edge of the stairs, which, pretty unrealistic. Whatever, her plot armor is already so obvious at this point. This is just basic stuff. And the vaccine is right in front of her. And then, out of fucking nowhere, Nikolai shows up and takes the vaccine. He drops some very stupid and hilarious cliche villain lines, and then makes Jill fall onto that same area, where the third boss fight is now waiting for us. Alright, let's go. At first, you fight him almost the exact same way you did in the second boss battle. However, now he has this fleshy tentacle arm, which he almost exclusively attacks you with. This phase is nothing special, nor is it all that challenging. Like in the second boss fight, you just have to spam the shit out of him with the grenade launcher. And then we get to a short cutscene, and it's Carlos. Man, that's a very great coincidence that he just happens to be here. And he's also at the exact spot where he needs to be, because now we get to the second phase. And now Nemesis again starts running around in circles, just like in the second boss fight. And then he hides between one of these tanks. But conveniently, Carlos can tell us behind which tank he is hiding. And then we have to shoot that tank to electrify and stun Nemesis before he can surprise attack us. And while Nemesis is hiding, for some reason, 2 random zombies get dropped in the arena. I don't know how they got here, but I guess they're just here to make the fight a bit more challenging. But then again, you can easily just walk up to them, blast them with 1 shotgun round, and continue the fight. This boss design feels pretty clumsy. Gameplay-wise, this is fine, I guess. It's certainly different from the other phases. Logistically, this phase doesn't make any sense, but I guess it's still nice to do something else for a bit. This is actually my personal favorite phase out of all the boss fights, because it's the most unique in terms of fighting strategy. However, I don't really get what Nemesis' goal with this is. Why is he hiding behind these things until he decides to jump at Jill? He also should realize, after getting zapped once, that this might not be the best way of surviving this fight. Besides, why are we even able to shoot these red buttons or activation fields on these tanks? Is there any in-universe explanation for why Umbrella built them that way? And there's one other thing I have to point out specifically. When Nemesis jumps at you from these tanks and successfully hits you, you see this short attack animation. What the fuck? This is the most upsetting instance of Jill having insane plot armor and Nemesis being the biggest fucking idiot. She's on the ground and Nemesis is above her, and he bites her many times until grabbing her with his mouth and throwing her to the side. And she stands up after that. Firstly, she should be so dead after that. But also, Nemesis is just a clown. He had the best opportunity to just kill her right there. He even had her entire body between his teeth. Just crunch her to pieces. It's so easy. How on earth do you expect me to take Nemesis serious at all? Or even be scared of him? This is insane. So you just continue fighting him in that manner. He does some different attacks, like charging at you and stuff. And at least this fight confronts you with some new mechanics. It also feels the least repetitive out of the 3, technically 4 boss fights in this game. And when you finally beat him, Carlos lowers this gigantic claw for Jill to jump on and get out of this dispenser area. And he also uses it to completely destroy Nemesis by slamming him into the wall. Not sure how he managed to create that much force with that mechanical claw, or even the momentum, but guys, just don't think about it. So Jill gets onto the claw, and Carlos floods the area with some sort of super acid that starts killing Nemesis. Jill is safe, and Carlos tells her that he'll wait outside for her. And Jill now goes after Nikolai. She walks through some rooms, and then she actually runs into him. They both point their gun at each other, but then something bursts out of the wall and separates them. Jill falls 1 story below, and it's Nemesis. Again. And he now is this weird flower plant monster. And Nikolai sees this from above and starts laughing. And again, dropping the most boring lines ever. And then he runs away. And then Carlos shows up. Jill tells him to go after Nikolai, while she'll deal with Nemesis. And so we get to the final boss fight of the game. Like I said, I don't even think this is a true boss fight, because it's so short and just very boring. So this poison ivy version of Nemesis can't move, but it also cannot be harmed by any of our normal weapons. Oh no, what are we going to do now? Well, thankfully, and very conveniently, right behind us, there is a huge laser cannon that looks like it came straight out of Doom. And Jill grabs it. Of course, she immediately knows how to operate it. And of course, it's also loaded. Like, how can she even hold that thing? Anyway, she shoots Nemesis with it, which does a ton of damage to him. But he's not fully done yet. So now we have to recharge the cannon by manually pushing these containers or batteries on the sides of the room back in. And Nemesis tries to stop us, but he does a pretty bad job. There are these weak spots on his plant body that we need to destroy. And when all of them are destroyed, he falls unconscious for a pretty long time. And yeah, Jill takes the recharged cannon, shoots Nemesis, he falls forward, and we get a 1-second QuickTime event where we just have to walk forward. It's the weirdest looking thing. It seriously takes like 1 second at most, and then the cutscene continues. So stupid. And Jill shoves the laser cannon up Nemesis' mouth and finally completely kills him. This fight doesn't even get a score. It's barely a boss fight, and I just can't take it serious at all. I have to admit though, that this form of Nemesis, in terms of design, looks pretty freaking cool. So that's it. Nemesis is dead, and Jill makes her way outside the facility. And then we get to the top, and there's Carlos, seemingly knocked out. Jill runs to check on him, and then Nikolai kicks her, disarms her, and starts having another of those very cheap villain monologues. He takes the vaccine and destroys it. And just as he's about to shoot Jill, Carlos apparently got up and charges into him, and they have an epic fight. At the end, Carlos manages to fixate Nikolai. Jill gets her gun and hesitates to shoot because she's worried that she will hit Carlos. But Carlos convinces her to shoot. So she does, and of course she hits Nikolai, and Carlos is fine. And again, he drops the best line ever. Hey, I told you I couldn't leave you in a Carlos-less world. So epic, man. So they get into the helicopter, fly off into the sunset, and as they look back upon Raccoon City, it gets nuked. Yeah. And we get a short ending narration by Jill, saying that she'll destroy Umbrella and that they are the source of all horrible things and everything evil in the world. And we get to the credits. And in the credits, there plays like this J-pop rock song, which is so out of place. I don't know how they could have ended the game in any weirder or more unfitting way. It feels like the ending song to some mediocre anime movie. Why? Why would you choose that song? I really don't get it. And that's it. That's the entire game. Man, what an adventure. So now, let's take a more focused look on specific aspects. Starting with the game's story. The story is kind of bad, honestly. It's just your basic zombie apocalypse with a big evil corporation behind it, and we follow Jill trying to get out of the city and not get killed by Nemesis in the process. Of course, there's also the vaccine, but that plotline is just dropped at the end by Nikolai shooting the sample. Although, if I'm not mistaken, Jill was holding another sample of the vaccine in the last scene of the game. Not sure what's up with that. How did she even get the second one? Still, the story is nothing special. It's not complex at all. Then again, Resident Evil was never praised for its amazing storytelling. There's honestly so little to say about the story, because it's just so bare bones. There's just nothing to talk about. So, moving on to the characters. What do we have here? Our protagonist Jill. She's pretty bad in my eyes. And this goes far beyond all the plot armor issues we've already talked about. But let's just start there. Jill fucking survives everything in this game. Not only that, but she also doesn't even get injured by many things that she should absolutely get severely injured by. She falls off so many things onto a hard, solid ground and doesn't break anything. She sometimes is and sometimes isn't immune to the rockets coming out of a rocket launcher. The same exact rocket launcher, by the way. She often has Spider-Man-like abilities when it comes to clinging to an edge of a platform, and she can apparently turn the one being that was designed to kill her into a complete moron. Besides all that, her character is just nothing more than a female power fantasy. And it's not even a good one. She's always super cool and badass. In every interaction, she just can't resist but to drop some cold and overly cool line of dialogue. And while she says those lines, she carries a pretty arrogant and self-confident look on her face, and everyone else also thinks she's super cool and loves her. The other big issue I have with her as a video game protagonist is that she always looks super pretty. When you walk through the streets filled with zombies, she always has that model gaze on her face. And even after all that shit that she goes through, she still looks great. It's like in fucking Black Widow, where Natasha realistically dies like 11 times, but then at the end, still looks just fine. But that's a totally different story. Black Widow sucked, by the way. Anyway, back to Jill. If you want to make her this badass female character that can take a beating and go toe-to-toe with a huge monster killing machine, then why not show that by giving her some scars and cuts? But that's exactly the thing. The female protagonist always needs to look super attractive and pretty. And Jill really seems to be a good person, except for her sporadic arrogance and coldness. But like, that's it. There's nothing more to her character. She's just a badass female cop that wants to save Raccoon City. And that's fine for the purpose of this game, but no one can tell me that she is a well-written character. Now, let's take a look at the best character in this game. My boy Carlos. I really like him. He's super nice, humble, witty. He's not a good character by any means, but the way he carries himself in every moment is just great. He's just such a good guy. He rescues Jill from Nemesis multiple times and acts super humble about it. He even says to her that she saved them first by distracting Nemesis that one time.
Thanks for the same.
Hey, you saved my ass first. You're a hell of a lot braver than me.
And he totally ignores the fact that he was the one who saved Jill first. Plus, he genuinely wants to help the city and the remaining citizens.
If it means I can help save the city, it's fine by me.
And he's a fucking badass. He can just straight up punch all these mutated, super strong monsters away. My only slight issue with him is his a bit overdone affection for Jill. I mean, as soon as he hears that the train derailed and that Jill's in trouble, he literally spends 12 hours looking for her. I'm not sure if that would take priority over his mission, but who knows. Maybe there really wasn't anything more urgent or more important to do, but overall, their dynamic feels fine to me. It's not like a super weird or forced romance, like in Aquaman for example. It feels pretty natural, relatively speaking. Nikolai. Oh well, Nikolai. He's the worst villain I've seen in a very, very long time. He always behaves like a total asshole. He only looks after himself. He has these stupid and pretentious speeches about, ooh, I have to only watch out for myself. The only life that matters is my own, blah 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 blah. And what was he even doing the whole time? He got paid by a secret agent that wanted him to eliminate Umbrella or something? He just wants money. That's it. No personal connection to any of the characters, or Umbrella, or anything. It's the weakest motivation ever. He's like below the bare minimum of what the role of a villain should be in a story. Plus, he always just appears out of nowhere and then he leaves again. I don't get this guy. He isn't a character. He's just this evil machine that does things and has an asshole attitude the entire time. I want money, I don't care about anyone. I'm an insufferable asshole and I only care about getting paid. Man, what a truly awful villain. How did he even get into this squad with Carlos and Tyrell and the Russian captain? We don't even know his role in this squad, or if they were like friends or not. Whatever. Nikolai is hands down the worst character in the entire game. So, next up we got Tyrell. He's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, sure. It's a stupid cliche. The black dude that gets killed by the monster. But I think it's nice that he had that buddy relationship with Carlos. Even though it wasn't explored at all, at least we can infer some of their history together. Although the game shouldn't get any praise for that. Still, I kind of like him. The Russian captain is pretty fun. but there's nothing to him other than generic army captain guy, so yeah. And now we get to Nemesis. Well, where do I even start with this absolute catastrophe? His design is pretty cool. He looks super awesome in all of his different forms. And I think the overall concept of him transforming and adapting depending on his environment is pretty neat. However, that's where it ends in terms of praises, because this guy is a total idiot. He has so many opportunities to kill Jill, and he doesn't act upon any of them. There are so many cases in which Nemesis has Jill pinned down, and there's no way for her to get away. But then Nemesis either decides to throw her away from himself, or to walk slowly towards her, stand there looking cool and evil. And it's even more stupid because of Jill's huge plot armor. Nemesis can barely do anything to her, and she can dodge pretty much all of his attacks. But then you also have Nemesis being completely incompetent. If he at least tried to kill her with everything he had, then the only issue would be her plot armor. But they're both poorly done. Nemesis is essentially the main selling point of this game, but the way he acts and goes about trying to kill Jill is so incredibly incompetent that I never felt any danger. Mr. X was much more of a threat in the Resi 2 remake. And that brings me to another big problem, which is the scripted nature of the Nemesis encounters. Just playing through the game, I always knew when Nemesis was out of the picture. All the sections where you run away from him or fight him are very strongly separated by the rest of the game. This is a problem, because Nemesis is supposed to be this untouchable, cold, calculated killing machine with only one goal in mind: eliminating Jill Valentine. But unlike Mr. X, I never felt any tension or suspense when Nemesis wasn't there, because the game made it so apparent that I was safe in these sections. I also find it hilarious that Nemesis manages to kill multiple random people that aren't even his target at all, but then, whenever he gets an obvious chance to complete his mission, he becomes completely stupid. It's almost like Umbrella messed up his programming. And this is a true bummer, because Nemesis was the only thing I was actually looking forward when playing this game. So let's talk about the gameplay. This is probably one of the best aspects of the game, and it's mostly because of the many similarities to the excellent Resident Evil 2 remake of 2019. The gunplay is fine, it's not very great, nor bad. Like I said, the boss fights range from mediocre to straight up bad. It's actually much more fun to fight the other creatures in the game, but they also have their own big issues. To start, you are just way too powerful. Jill can dodge almost every attack, not only from normal enemies, but also from Nemesis, and Carlos can just punch them away like it's nothing for him. And you carry so many guns and weapons with you. This game is much more of an action game than a horror game. And for a Resident Evil game, I don't think this is optimal. And the game's understanding of difficulty is pretty surface level and simply disappointing. I mentioned these rancor enemies before, but what I didn't talk about was their one-hit kill attack. There's no way to avoid it. As soon as they jump towards you and hit you, you're dead. You're just dead. There's no way to avoid being one-shotted by this attack, except for always keeping your distance and trying to kill them as quickly as possible. And in the only truly challenging sections of this game, the developers decided just to throw in multiple of these fuckers in a pretty tight space, so that your chances of being hit by this stupid attack are much higher. This is not a clever or engaging or interesting way to make a game challenging. If anything, it's just annoying. The challenge is artificial in a way. The game or its enemies aren't intrinsically challenging. They just have some stupid advantage on the player. Yeah, there's just not a whole lot to praise in terms of gameplay, even though this is one of the better aspects of the game. You know, the biggest issue most people had with this game when it came out was that it was too short. And for a full price game at 60 fucking bucks, this is very understandable. But I personally took around 11 hours to complete this game, which is much longer than most people spend just playing through the game once. But I think this is because I have a very completionistic approach to games, which means that I will look around the entire map and try to find every item and just see all there is to see in the game. So that could maybe explain the extra time I spent with it. And I also didn't really struggle at any point or got hung up at a certain section. It all went pretty smoothly, so I'm not sure why it took that much longer for me than for most people. But still, the entire point of me even mentioning this is that I think the runtime or playtime is one of the game's smaller issues. In terms of its characters, gameplay, and narrative, I think there are much, much bigger problems. So now we get to the more artistic stuff. I think the animations and the cutscenes look pretty good overall. Although some of the facial expressions didn't seem that right to me. They kind of gave me some Mass Effect Andromeda vibes. Although obviously not nearly as bad. Man, you guys remember Mass Effect Andromeda? That was a whole thing. But yeah, that stuff with the facial expressions, that might be pretty individual. I had some problems with it in certain sections, but in general, I think it works quite well. The voice acting is fine. It's not good, per se, but it's definitely not bad. I don't feel too strongly about it. I think I would say it's rather good than bad, but yeah, there's nothing special about it. The safe room piano melody is pretty nice, and there are some rare good ambient tracks as well, but it's mostly just your very generic, typical horror game music. And oh god, how could I forget that ridiculously unfitting credit song with the electric guitars and the whole bright and hopeful vibes? It's so strange. I don't get that decision at all. Why? Why did they choose that track? I don't get it. Now, this whole episode has been pretty negative overall, so now I want to point out the one thing that I really enjoyed about the Resi 3 remake, which is the creature design. This is, however, not talking about the normal zombies, because those ones are just very generic. It's all the stronger monsters and Nemesis himself. Like I said previously, the zombies infected / transformed by Nemesis look very awesome. These huge crocodile dog monsters in the sewers also look super cool, especially when they open their mouth and try to swallow you. These mini rancor creatures look fine. I don't think they look as great as the rest of the monsters, but they're still cool, even just for the fact that they remind me of the rancors of Star Wars. And then we have my favorite enemy in the game, which are these pale, humanoid, very creepy sounding creatures. And it's not just their design and the sounds that they make that I find cool, but also the fact that they are incredibly dangerous, even though they look so weak and fragile. I was more afraid of these guys than of Nemesis or any of the other enemies. The way they walk very slowly, and then once they spot you, start charging towards you out of nowhere, is very creepy to me. Actually, the most scary part of the entire game for me was that one very large room where you have to fight 4 or 5 of these guys. It wasn't very challenging, but just the way you hear their slow steps in the distance and take them out one by one really got my fear going. In this aspect, the game does a really good job actually. All of the creature designs, for the most part, do a very great job in adding to that Resident Evil vibe. Although I would have wished to maybe have 1 or 2 more different enemies, still, great job Resi 3, you did something pretty good for once. So, that's it. These are all my thoughts on the Resident Evil 3 remake. Mostly negative, some positive, some just meh stuff that isn't really worth discussing. Overall, it's way worse than the Resi 2 remake, and for the few things the game does well, there are so many other things it does very poorly. I still had fun playing it, and the game works. There are no noticeable bugs I've encountered at all, but this doesn't really help to make up all the other stuff that is just straight up bad. My final score is a 5 out of 10, and I feel very confident with that assessment, looking at everything we've covered. So yeah, that's it. By the looks of it, this will be a shorter episode than the Cuphead one. I'm actually pretty happy with the length of this episode. So yeah guys, if you have any specific thoughts or things you want to share, be sure to go to the comment section of the YouTube video for this episode. Of course, also if you want to see the extra visuals for what I'm talking about. So yeah guys, thank you so much for watching / listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.